So I need you to picture something for me. It's a Thursday morning, you've got your coffee and you're on your hot girl walk, or you've got your commute, whatever it is for you. And someone in your life, maybe a friend, a sister, a colleague, maybe someone you just follow online, sends you a message that says, "Hey, have you heard of the Sage Sorority podcast? You need to listen to this episode." And now you're here. Hi, hello, welcome. And I'm so genuinely glad that you have found us. Good morning, and welcome back to the Sage Sorority. How are we all doing, guys? Happy Thursday. Happy the gathering day to all those who celebrate. I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone this evening. Of course, it's Thursday, so I had to deliver a podcast as we do. I do want to say a quick thing. Quick little housekeeping is I will be taking a production break. It is well needed. There's some things I need to iron out behind the scenes and get everything tight and sorted and ready to go. So I will be back with episode 58 on April 9th. So we've got an episode today, we've got an episode next week, and then we will be taking a little production break. I will come back after the Easter weekend and we'll get back into it to our regular programming. I'm looking forward to the break. I've got a lot that I kind of need to do. So it's definitely not a vacation at all, but well overdue. So just want to let you know if I am part of your Thursday morning or Friday morning or any morning routine. We've got today's episode, we've got next week's episode, and then I will be taking a 3-week break. And I'll be back on April 9th with episode 58 after the Easter weekend. So I need you to picture something for me. It's a Thursday morning, you've got your coffee and you're on your hot girl walk, or you've got your commute, whatever it is for you. And someone in your life, maybe a friend, a sister, a colleague, maybe someone you just follow online, sends you a message that says, "Hey, have you heard of the Sage Sorority podcast? You need to listen to this episode." And now you're here. Hi, hello, welcome. And I'm so genuinely glad that you have found us. Or maybe you are one of our legendary sages and you've been here from the very beginning. You remember episode 1, the reset. You remember the early days. Maybe you've been with me every single Thursday since February 13th, 2025. If that's you, this episode is for you as well. Consider this your highlights reel, your anniversary gift, and your reminder of everything that we've discussed and built together. My name is Shantel Russo, and I'm the founder and host of the Sage Sorority podcast, where the only dues are your ears, never your dignity. We are 55 episodes deep so far, which, depending on the day, either feels insane to say or feels like we are just getting started. But truthfully, it's both. Today is episode 56, and I want to take you guys back to the very beginning, not in a sentimental way, but more so in a let me actually show you what this podcast is all about and what it's made of. We're covering episodes 1 through 25, what we discussed, why it mattered, and what I think you should go back to and listen to. So get comfy with your tea, coffee, or wine. If you are new here or you're returning, here's where to start. So most importantly is episode 1, the reset, really discusses why this show exists. So let me tell you what the Sage Sorority is, and more importantly, what it is not. I would not say it's necessarily a self-help podcast. I know that that's a very vague blanket term that I don't necessarily hate, but I don't 100% agree with. It's definitely not a dating podcast, and it's not a manifest your best life, girl boss, rise and grind situation podcast either. This is also not a incessant glow up podcast. So if that is what you're looking for, I love, love, love you down, but this is probably not your permanent spot. What it is and what I wanted it to be from day one is more like the group chat, the one where your most thoughtful friend says something and you're like, "Oh, that really clicked for me," or "Oh, that's a really good brain tickle," or "Oh, that's something I'm going to journal about," where you don't feel like a problem to be solved, where someone's actually speaking to your intelligence and your experience at the same damn time. I launched this show on February 13th, 2025. And if you heard episode 1, the reset, you know that me actually hitting publish on the first episode was its whole journey on its own. I had wanted to do a podcast from as early as 2017, legitimately 2017. I lived in Toronto at the time. This was what feels like a million years ago. I second guessed myself, third guessed myself, fourth guessed myself for years, so many times that at a certain point, I really just had to decide, am I a person who talks about doing things, or am I a person who talks about doing things and then actually does them. I'm telling you, it was just that simple. It's not that the fear went away. It's not that the cringeness went away. It's not that I felt ready. I just was sick of my own story. You know what I mean? And episode 1 and the Sage Sorority podcast was my answer to that question. In that episode, I talked about what I felt like was missing in the content space for women, specifically women in their 30s and 40s, can also include late 20s. There's a ton of content for women that are 22, post-college, in college, but I just don't feel like there's enough content for women who are in a different type of mid-chapter. We're not quite middle age, and we're probably not at menopause just yet, but I do feel like the content in that demographic really focuses on motherhood, parenting, and or marriage. And what if you want more than that for your life, or that's not something that you want for your life, or a variation of something in the middle? Women who are navigating real life, real love, real friendships, real self-concept and identity questions, and where is the content and the space for them? And I also wanted it to feel like something specific, not necessarily advice from above, because I'm not a therapist, I'm not a guru, and I'm not someone who's telling you exactly what to do. It's more like, hey, I am actually just like you. I am your peer. I'm sitting across from you. I've got something on my mind. Maybe you have something similar. Let's think it through together. That is the foundation, and that has never changed. So from the very start, I kind of made a bet. The bet was that the women listening to this show were more interested in understanding themselves than they were in being fixed. And I can say hand on heart that that bet has paid off every single time. Some of the earliest episodes that really resonated, and I could feel it, like something just landed differently, were the identity episodes. So episode 5 is the one that I go back to a lot. 30 lessons I learned in my 30s. And look, I know lessons I've learned episodes or listicles are their own genre at this point. I do love these episodes, I'm not going to lie. Everyone does them. But what made that episode feel different, at least to me, was that I wasn't just listing things that sounded wise. I really wanted to make sure that I was saying things that could directly tie back to my life. And I was also reckoning with the fact that who I thought I'd be by now and who I actually am, and the gap in between that. And there's something in that honesty that I think people really responded to. It is one of our most popular episodes. And then we go to episode 11, which is called Unlearning the Lies, What Women in Their 30s and 40s Know Now. And this was actually inspired by a TikTok where I asked women in their 30s and 40s to name a belief that they'd let go of and kind of the game changed for them. And the responses I got were so good. And you just can't beat real life responses from real life people. And that episode ended up being this really layered conversation about what women inherit and the stories that we carry about ambition and our worthiness and what we're allowed to want and how expansive we're allowed to be and how much of it was actually ours to begin with versus something we just absorbed through life and we never questioned. Episode 12, Big Energy, No Apology. This is definitely the confidence episode, but this was about confidence that truly lives in your body before it shows up anywhere else. The kind of confidence that does not disappear the moment someone pushes back on you or when the room goes quiet. And that distinction really matters here. And I think a lot of women know the difference from their own experience. And now that I'm saying this, I feel like in prep for the event tomorrow, I probably need to go re-listen to my own words. Finally, we have episode 19, which is You're Not Lost, You're Just Not Living on Purpose Yet. Another really popular episode. I think the title alone maybe triggered people. I don't know. But there is a specific kind of feeling that a lot of women in their 30s have, and maybe other ages have it too, but I can only speak to my own experience. And it's you're not in crisis and you're not necessarily unhappy, but you're also not fully switched on. Like there's a bit of a drift. And this episode, I feel like, gives language to something that a lot of people are feeling, but I guess you just can't really articulate, right? It's so tough because first world problems, and if everyone put their problems in a pile, you would quickly grab yours back. But then you also know when something's not quite as it should be or something's like not 100%. And I really feel like episode 19 speaks to that. At the end of the day, the through line between all of these are who are you when your CV and the relationship status don't get to answer first, right? That is the question at the heart of so much of what we talk about at the Sage Sorority. So if you're questioning who you are outside of your roles and anything to do with identity, self-concept, and becoming her, I highly recommend you check out those episodes. So of course, this is our dynamic lives. we got to talk about love, dating, and the lies that we tell ourselves. So, when it comes to dating, I've always been very clear and very honest that in general, I find it to be quite low vibrational. Dating is so nuanced and so textured. And while there are some hard and fast rules, there is a lot of gray. And there is a lot of gray because you're dealing with people. People are fallible, they change their minds, they change their feelings. There's a lot going on when it comes to dating. So I've always been really cautious about dating content because there's so much of it. And I think it's just designed to make women feel bad and to make them feel like they are the problem. And it can also validate your worst fears, or it hypes you up with advice that is actually so not helpful and doesn't actually fly in the real world, at least for most people. And I just don't want that for the Sage Sorority. And that's why I tiptoe about it pretty carefully, I think. I give advice and my honest thought. Like whatever I talk about on the pod, I believe, but I especially believe when it comes to dating. And I want to leave enough gray area and enough unanswered questions so that you yourself can fill in the blanks on what makes sense for you specifically. But what I do always want to do is ask better questions. So in episode 3, First Love Forever Standards, this is what I called a relationship blueprint theory. I think if you've been in the personal development space or you've gone to therapy, you know that everything stems from childhood and your early childhood experiences. But I feel like we hyper focus on what happened to us when we were 5, 7, 10, 12, and kind of ignore what happened to us when we were 15, 17, 18, 19. And I think those core experiences, especially because at that age, you're either losing your virginity or you're getting into very serious relationships in a way that you never did prior. And that episode wasn't about here's why you're dating wrong. It was more here's where this sort of habit and trait and beliefs might have started and that it's worth looking at. Highly recommend that episode. It's one of my personal favorites. Then we get into episode 7, which is Who Is He Really? And it's one that I think people enjoyed a lot because it's very practical. It's about the gap between someone who presents themselves and who they actually are when you pay attention over time. Ultimately, it's always behavior over words, consistency over chemistry. We get into that a lot deeper as the pod evolves. But that episode cuts through a lot of noise very quickly. And if you are in your dating era, highly recommend episode 7. Finally, episode 17, When Loving Him Meant Losing Herself. This is one where I get a little bit more punchy. It's definitely a harder episode. It's what desperation actually looks like in relationships. And I'm going to be honest, desperation and poorly fit people or mismatched people, I would say, looks a lot different in your 30s than it does in your 20s. And just how quietly that kind of mismatch can really creep in. How you can go from being a fully formed person to someone who is slowly being erased because of your relationship. And it never comes in one dramatic moment, or at least it rarely does. But it's usually by 1,000 little small ones. That's why that saying, death by a million paper cuts, is so real. That episode 17, asks you to look honestly at whether you're in a relationship that is expanding you and helping you thrive, or you are in a relationship that is slowly making you smaller. None of these are about rules or waiting 3 days to text back, although I'm not a fan of the double text, especially when you're in the dating phase. It's not about games. It's really just about let's cut through the noise, see what's actually happening here, and most importantly, what do you actually want and what are you actually willing to do to get it? Now, it could never be a TSS recap without talking about a huge tenet over here, and that is friendship. In my opinion, we don't talk about friendship enough. It is kind of like an understood thing, even though we don't actually really understand because most of us were never taught how to be good friends. And I genuinely believe that female friendship is one of the most underrated and underdiscussed and underinvested topics in health research, wellness, and the self-development space. Truly, truly, truly. And I decided early on that the Sage Sorority was going to take this very seriously, and it was going to be a very consistent through line throughout all of our content. And if I'm being so for real, it's something that I think about regularly in my own life. I've had my own issues, and I remember feeling like resources were very scarce. In episode 6, The Sisterhood Chronicles Part 1, Why Female Friendships Are So Complex and Beautiful, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but this is our most popular episode. Consistently, every time I look at our stats from the beginning of the pod, this has always been our number one episode. And I discuss it, I think, in good form. Like, not just your girlfriends matter, but actually looking at what the research says about what female friendships do for our health, our longevity, our sense of self. It's not a feel-good sentiment. It's so much more than that. There's real data behind it. The data may be scarce on friendship, but it is quite telling. And I wanted that episode to feel like the argument for female friendship that we all deserve to hear and we all need to be reminded of, both as a friend in the receiving end and being a good friend on the giving end. If you are new to the Sage Sorority, there's no bad episode to listen to, but you absolutely need to listen to episode 6. In episode 10, we talk about, do men do friendship better? And I loved making this episode because it's something that's anecdotally thrown around a lot. And we talked a lot about male friendships as shallower and less emotionally invested, and that's not a slight, that is what the data says. But that episode asks whether there might be something genuinely freeing about the lower stakes way that men often let each other off the hook. I know there are serious caveats to that, but again, I want to ask the question and we can brainstorm and think about it together. There's less performing. There's also less intensity. And I wanted to discuss and see whether women could borrow some of that without losing their own depth. I think it's a really good brain tickle. Episode 23, making new friends as an adult, because nobody talks about how actually hard this is. Coming from someone who moved to another continent by herself, I know this firsthand. The awkwardness of initiating, the realization that most people have been friends with school friends, so it's kind of hard to wedge your way in. The vulnerability of showing up consistently and having to build that bridge with someone who's new, and the hurtfulness when you realize that not everyone cares like you do. The ways in which we also hold ourselves back because we've been burned before. I could probably make a whole pod on that, just to be honest. This episode was practical and honest in a way that I think is really helpful. So if you are in your making new friends era, spring is upon us and the days are getting longer. Highly, highly, highly recommend. And finally, episode 25, the friendship audit. Probably one of my most referenced episodes in the whole first half because the idea is actually evaluating your friendships with the same rigor, intensity, and fury and love that you would apply to anything else important in your life. Who is adding to you? Who is draining for you? Who are you showing up for? Who's showing up for you? And what do you do with that information? The friendship episodes consistently bring me the most DMs, not the dating ones, the friendship ones. And I think it's because a lot of women are carrying friendship grief, friendship confusion, friendship loneliness, and they don't always have the language for that. And I wanted to provide it. Please be sure that after our production break, we'll be giving you way more friendship content in 2026. One thing I've tried to do from the start is speak to anyone who's listening to this podcast as the intelligent, curious woman that I truly believe you are. And that also means that not every episode necessarily has to be me yapping. Sometimes it's about pointing out where, somewhere, or something can be useful for you. Episode 9 is one of my personal favorites because I also love to listen to episodes like this. And that was 5 podcasts that changed my life. And it's honestly a little window into how I think and my own ideologies and how they have formed, especially over the last decade. The shows that I recommended in that episode, they shaped the way I approach conversation, advice, and what I think good content can actually do for a person. And it's so interesting because Modern Love is now mostly behind a paywall. It comes from the New York Times column of Modern Love. And Dear Sugars doesn't upload anymore, but their episodes are not archived. You can still listen to them. But beautiful, beautiful, beautiful podcast. There is a particular episode of Modern Love, which inspired my 51st dates. It brought me to tears. Fantastic pod through and through and through, 10 out of 10, no notes. And if you want to understand, I think, where my empathetic yet stern but considerate point of view comes from, especially intellectually, I think that those pods are truly part of the answer. I mentioned a few more pods. I love all these pods for very different reasons. If you want to know all my recommendations, check out episode 9. Episode 24, the therapy episode, is definitely one of my more denser episodes, but it's actually an episode I'm quite proud of. We continue the conversation around therapy, but it's truly a ground floor. Maybe you've gone to therapy, maybe you haven't, but if you ever wanted to know what it actually looks like, feels like, and what everything means, the therapy episode is for you. It was a very honest conversation, slightly prescriptive. Everyone can benefit from therapy, but how long you do it and to what degree is totally up to you. But it was definitely my opinion and my ground floor introduction to something that I am inherently very passionate about. Okay, so we've covered a lot. And like I said at the top of the episode, for the new listener, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is going to be your roadmap. And for the loyal listener, this is more of a reminder. We're getting into spring, which is essentially our new year. And I want to show you how much ground you've covered, but also let's emphasize some things that we've probably forgotten. Like I said, 1 to 25 episodes may feel like a lot, and don't worry, because here is exactly where to start or to repeat based on what's going on in your life right now. So consider this your Sage Sorority prescription. If you're in a season of rebuilding or starting over, start with episode 1, the reset. That is the foundation. Then you're going to go straight into episode 2, a case for optimism, which is about choosing optimism as an active practice when the ground feels unstable and life feels a little fucked up. And for all of us right now listening in March of 2026, I think we can all agree with that. And if you want a third episode, you're going to go to episode 15, the courage to evolve. And that is about what it actually takes to reinvent yourself when the version of you that everyone is used to no longer works for you. She's clocked out. If you're questioning a relationship or maybe even a situationship, episode 7, who is he really? First things first. You got to start there. Then you're going to go back to episode 3, First Love Forever Standards, for the deeper context on where your patterns come from. And if you've ever felt like you've lost yourself in someone or in a relationship, you need to go to episode 17, when loving him meant losing herself. It's slightly uncomfortable, but in the best possible way. I love you. If your friendships feel off or you're feeling lonely in a way that maybe you can't explain, episode 6, of course, is going to be your starting point, the Sisterhood Chronicles Part 1. Then you're going to follow it with episode 25, which is the friendship audit, which will give you a framework for actually understanding what is happening. And if you're at the stage of wanting to build new friendships, but you don't quite know how, of course, you're going to go to episode 23, which will fill that gap. If you've been feeling like you've outgrown the version of yourself that everyone expects, you're going to start at episode 11, Unlearning the Lies. Then you're going to go to episode 19, You're Not Lost, You're Just Not Living on Purpose Yet, which is for the specific feeling of drifting that isn't quite unhappiness, but isn't quite right either. Finally, if you just want to understand what kind of show this is before you commit, hit subscribe, leave us a comment, and send it to a friend. Episode 9, the podcast recommendations, is a window into how I think. And episode 21, New Month, New Mood, which is one of my more journal style, behind the scenes episodes, a little bit more unfiltered. And honestly, it's one of the episodes that best shows what the Sage Sorority actually feels like day to day. Those are all of your starting points in your prescription. Everything else is a bonus. And trust me, it's a very, very good bonus, I must say. Okay, and there you have it. That is the perfect roundup and prescription for the first 25 episodes. This is where the Sage Sorority started. I built this show because I wanted something that I felt didn't exist yet, something that was sharp and warm and honest and punchy all at once, that didn't necessarily like talk down to you or hand you some arbitrary plan, but just sat with you and intellectually sparred with you, if that makes sense. And every week you guys have showed up, and that is not a small thing, and I'm so grateful. It is so fitting that the gathering is tonight to really celebrate all the knowledge and listening and all the yapping that I have done over the past year. Oh my goodness. So come back next Thursday, where I'm going to go through the same structure for episodes 25 to 53, I believe, where the show really found its footing, started to go in different directions, and honestly started to really take root. I love you guys so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight if you are attending. Of course, next week I will give you guys the full lowdown on Tinseltown and give you a little recap before I take my production break. Have an amazing Thursday and amazing weekend. I will talk to you next week. Bye.